So we're now going to go to Kathleen Lowrey, from Canada, and Raine McLeod from Canada. Kathleen is Associate Professor of Anthropology in the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. She's Women's Human Rights Country Contact for Canada, along with Raine McLeod. And Kathleen, you're going to give us an update on your work situation, I think, about what's happening in your in Canada. So over to you, Kathleen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll be quick. And I should say we actually have in Canada, we also have Ghislaine Gendron, who's the Francophone. So we're a complicated country. Anyway, so it's very kind. I'm actually not going to, Raine is going to be speaking about Canada in general. It was very kind. I was invited just to talk about my personal situation really quickly. So some of you may know that last March, I was dismissed from a position within my university. It was just an administrative position, so I'm fine. I still have my salary, I still have my job, but I was dismissed from an administrative position because students complained that I was a gender critical feminist, that I was a TERF, and so I was harming students, and the administration got very scared and it dismissed me. So this made kind of a splash in the news in Canada and some other places in June after a colleague of mine wrote about it. And so the update about what's happening, I have to say in one sense, not much. So my faculty association sort of reluctantly took on my case that they're supposed to defend academic freedom for professors. It was clear from the start. At first the case was so egregious, and I didn't do it secretly. I told the people I was meeting with that I was going to be recording our meetings. So I recorded our meetings, and the things that they said were just, it was so obvious I was being dismissed for my views, not because I had been mean to students or anything like that. So at first my faculty association did take my case, but it's been very foot draggy about it. And then they contacted me in the fall to say that they had gotten some legal advice that suggested they couldn't pursue my case any further. And they would show me the legal advice, but I had to promise not to show it to anyone else. And I said I couldn't agree to those terms because I wanted to write about, I was like, well, I want to write about what's happened to me from a feminist perspective. So if you show me the legal advice, I'm going to tell people about it. So if you don't want me to tell people about it, don't show it to me. And I think that kind of freaked them out. And so they said, oh, we're actually going to go and find some more legal advice and we'll get back to you. And I said, okay, get back to me when you have more legal advice. And actually when Jocelyn contacted me this week, I thought, oh, I'll write and ask them what's going on. And so I wrote and said, what's going on? And they said, we have nothing to report to you. And I said, oh, well, I was just asking because the Women's Human Rights Campaign has invited me to update them at their international webinar. And then they wrote back and they said, but your case is very complicated. And in fact, my case is not complicated. My case is a straightforward case of people complaining about my views, which, under the rules of faculty contracts, that's just not supposed to amount to anything. So my case is not complicated, but what can we conclude from this? Because of course, in one way, my case pertains only to me. But in a larger sense, I think it's the thing that we see again and again, which is so many of these things happen by stealth, and they happen so that we're put on the back foot. So if my faculty association decides not to represent me, my only other option would be to hire a lawyer, which of course I can't afford to do. I'm just an ordinary person. And it's interesting that I think this gender identity ideology constantly puts people who oppose it in the position of, you're the one who has to hire a lawyer. So instead of them, in many cases, instead of going through formal channels, they sort of punish people in back channels, and then it's you who has to pursue formal channels for redress. Of course, they do also go straight to the law, but they do that in these kind of stealthy ways that you only find out later. Wait, the law says what now? Like men are being housed in women's prisons? Like, how did that happen? There was no public consultation. And I know Raine will talk about this. That's certainly been the case in Canada. We've had major legislative changes to kind of no public discussion, no media coverage. So all of this kind of stealth and coercion and silence, we see it again and again. And of course, the thing that works best against it is exactly what we're doing here. So it was wonderful to be able to say the Women's Human Rights Campaign, which is an international organization, is interested in my case, because that clearly rattled my faculty association. And to the extent that we're in a position to kind of rattle people who are doing things under the radar and just expecting us to all live with a fait accompli, we have to push back. Before I finish, I just wanted to say the other kind of interesting thing about having been canceled. One has been, it's been amazing. I've met so many amazing feminist women because of it. It's actually been a great experience. But the other thing that's happened is I'm now kind of a depository for secret messages from students who are either like, P.S., I think you're awesome, or I agree with you and I'm afraid to say that I agree with you. So all of us know there's a lot of support out there among people who are really not in a position to speak publicly. I will say I've been very disappointed in my colleagues. There's been dead silence from them. And I'm not gonna lie, I have regular fantasies about how embarrassed they're gonna be 10 years from now. But I don't know, we have to get from here to there, but we're doing what we can.
So immediately after the launch in October, we had a lot of interested women who wanted to participate. I think that the biggest problem in Canada right now is just the vastness of our country. By virtue of Canada being so big, we have provinces and territories that are having to run meetings together because there's kind of a deficit of women who are basically, they feel really alone, particularly in the eastern provinces where the population is incredibly small. So there's like one or maybe two or three of them out there, and they could be separated by an entire island, essentially. So BC and the Yukon are running their meetings together. I think there's one woman in the Yukon, hi Tracy. Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and then occasionally with Alberta going forward, are running together. Ontario is running alone, Quebec, because there's a lot of action out in Ontario and Quebec. And then Newfoundland and Nova Scotia are running together, basically, the East Coast. So we do have a few places without coordinators in Canada. So hopefully we can find women in places like PEI and the Northwest Territories and in Nunavut that are willing to be coordinators in the future. The provincial meetings happen monthly, and then I host a national meeting of all the coordinators at the end of the month, so we can talk about all of the work that's being done and the future plans of the individual groups. So in BC and the Yukon, they've been super busy. Their December meeting, they hosted at least like a dozen women, and there was a talk by legendary feminist Lee Lakeman, who is one of the founders of the much maligned and slandered Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter. They also discussed strategy and the work that BC feminists have been doing, including setting up a Slack space so that they can talk all together kind of more informally. And then they're talking about doing maybe a WordPress so that they can do something for blogging or updating purposes. Alberta have been contacting our MPs about Bill C6, which is the Canadian conversion therapy bill that includes gender identity and expression, and it basically guarantees affirmation only therapy for all Canadians. Previously, it was just for minors, but the only amendments that they've made are to add gender expression, because it was previously only gender identity, and to basically throw a net over the entire population of Canada, not just children, which is also just worse. So Alberta are producing a package of talking points for members' use during meetings. We're also forming a subcommittee to work on a private member's bill regarding sex not being a protected characteristic in the Alberta Human Rights Act. So here in Alberta, I'm in Calgary. So here in Alberta, the Alberta Human Rights Act only protects gender identity and expression. Sex did previously appear, but it was removed in the 90s because sex was considered to be a verb and gender was considered to be the noun. So that was gross and infuriating. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are holding their meetings together. At their January meeting, they discussed the Kirabel decision. You guys in the UK are just killing it. Like, it's bad that all this work has to be done, but the fact that you guys are setting precedents is hugely important, particularly since we're both countries in the Commonwealth. the stuff that happens in the UK is going to be hugely influential on the things that are happening in Canada. So Lisa Bilty from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms also spoke about her experiences. She's based in Vancouver, and she actually spoke at she was one of the women who testified at the Bill C-6 hearings. If you can, she killed it. She was just amazing. She knows exactly what she's talking about. She raised some incredible points. And then one of the MPs, Randall Garrison, actually basically just called her a transphobe, and it was just, everybody's just cheesed. That same guy actually said that detransition was a false narrative. So they're just doing a really poor job in Ottawa right now. So Lisa Bilty also spoke about the current state of legal education, given the influence of gender ideology. They've changed some things in BC that any lawyer has to, when they stand up, they have to introduce themselves using their pronouns and the pronouns of their client as well. She's spoken about her concerns about the rights of parents and children being violated, regarding secrecy in schools and stuff like that. And she indicated that she was keeping her eyes open for cases related to Bill C-16. In February, Heather Mason, who is a women's prison advocate, she's amazing. She has videos all over YouTube. She's been writing about this. She's been talking about this at length. She's incredible. So she'll be speaking with that group in February. And right now, there is a push right now to talk to our elected officials about the men who are being housed in women's prisons. Women are being sexually assaulted and harassed by the men in the prisons, and the government doesn't seem to care. So especially in light of the news coming out of the UK about the number of female offenders doubling in the last 4 years, it's obviously important that this be addressed as soon as possible. Our statistics are at risk, not to mention the imprisoned female population that is disproportionately Indigenous and who have a disproportionate history of addiction and sexual abuse. Really talk to Heather Mason. She's on Twitter, she's on Facebook, and she's got a lot of things on YouTube. She's definitely someone to support and to look out for. And if you're in Canada, send her stuff to your MPs. Send your stuff to them, because they really, really need to be more aware of the damage that's being done, because it's catastrophic. And there's going to be, the only way that we're going to be able to address this in the future is if we have just a list of victims. And we don't want a list of victims. We would like people to be proactive instead of reactive on this, because it's women who are in danger, and it's children in these women's prisons who are in danger. There's prisons in Ontario that have women, mother-child programs that are being housed with sex offenders who are like actual baby rapists. It's bad. So we're working really hard. Distance is the hardest thing, but we're underestimating the number of women who are interested across the country. That's basically it.